What's up, guys? This is Ty Zen again with prisonerfreedom.com. It's a blog where we talk about the tools, the techniques, and the strategies and the technologies that's available to help people find freedom in their life. And with us here today is James D'Angelo from the World Bitcoin Network. And we also have here Vitalik, okay, with the Ethereum project. And these are some of the guys that's in the forefront of helping people find freedom, you know, when it comes to the currency world, okay? How old are you by the time?
I just turned 20 a month ago.
Okay,
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Okay, good job. Hey, is it Vitalik or is it Vitalik or
Vitalik.
Vitalik?
Yeah.
Vitalik.
Okay, and last name Buterin.
Yeah.
Buterin? Okay. We want to talk to you about the Ethereum project that you're involved in and that you founded and everything. I'm going to ask you some of the non-technical questions, and James D'Angelo here, or in-house MIT graduate here, he's the one that's going to be asking you all the technical stuff. Okay. All right, so to get started, right, one of the common questions that we get is that what is Ethereum and what makes it different from Bitcoin?
Okay. So for about the past year now, there's been a lot of interest in this concept, which we're calling cryptocurrency 2.0. So you have this idea of a Bitcoin blockchain, but can you use it for more than just money? So for example, there's this concept of Covert Coins, where you basically let people put their own currencies on top of Bitcoin. There's Mastercoin, which is decentralized exchange. People are thinking of making protocols for things like financial derivatives, peer-to-peer gambling, pretty much everything. So what Ethereum is that we're taking a somewhat different approach to that, and what we're saying is it's instead of having a blockchain that has lots of features, we're going to have a blockchain without any features. Like we don't even support multiple outputs. Instead, we're going to have just a programming language, and then whatever features you want, you just write it in the programming language.
Okay, so is Ethereum a programming language, or is it a public ledger, or is it a combination of both?
Okay, so Ethereum is a blockchain, and inside of the blockchain protocol, there is an integrated programming language.
Okay.
So even a basic transaction is something that someone else will program, or you guys?
So a basic transaction that does exist as a fundamental type, but anything more complicated, whether it's multi-sig, whether it's multiple outputs, whether it's an atomic trade, whether it's making your own currency, everything else that you could possibly build on top is a contract.
What's an atomic trade?
So atomic trades, that's a concept that's really relevant in the idea of colored coins. So the idea there is that if I have one green coin and you have 5 blue coins and we want to trade them, you can do the trade in a way that's trust-free. You have one transaction that sends the green coin from me to you and sends the 5 blue coins from you to me.
Okay, so for the non-technical people out there, right? When you say one green coin for 5 blue coins, what does that mean?
Right,
what do those coins represent?
Okay, so covered coins could represent anything. So you could have coins representing company shares. You could have coins representing some asset like US dollars. You could have single coins that represent some digital collectible.
Okay, so for example, like Twitter just went public recently. So now, how would that be used as a colored coin?
So if some company wants to launch an IPO on the blockchain, then they would basically create this new colored coin, and they would start off with themselves owning all of the units. And then they would just start selling the units off. And then whenever they want to pay dividends, then they would just automatically pay the bitcoins to whoever owns the colored coins at that particular time.
And so the algorithm would just run through the blockchain, and whoever has that coin at that time receives the dividends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what's really nice about it is even when you buy stock, you're actually trusting in that piece of paper holding your stock, right? It's like a bearer bond, or you're registered with an investment bank. This is proof. You know all the time exactly. Are you sure how many shares there are at Apple? You're not.
Yeah.
But are you sure that this guy bought X amount of shares and he's distributing it that way?
Okay.
The blockchain proves that, so your comfort with that stock is pretty exciting.
Okay. Now, when you say, okay, so now with this Ethereum to do all these colored coins and everything, why can't someone do that with Bitcoin now? That's like the common question, is that those features those things that you're talking about, right? Why can't someone write that script or that language on top of Bitcoin right now?
Right. So in terms of writing things on top using Bitcoin itself, one of the big problems with that is that in order for a lot of these things to become possible, you need to actually have a lot of features integrated right way into the bottom of the Bitcoin protocol, essentially. Because the issue is, like, let's take an example of something like a financial derivative, where I send in 10 Bitcoins, you send in 10 Bitcoins, and then after a month, it automatically sends me the same US dollar value of Bitcoins back. Like, that's something, a common use case, because it lets me store, it basically takes away volatility. So the problem with doing that on top of Bitcoin is that you would need to have, like, the contract that you write would need to have the power to actually move that certain quantity of Bitcoins back to me, right? So because the contract itself would actually have to have that power, the language for the contract would have to be baked right into the Bitcoin protocol. So Bitcoin does have a scripting system, but it's very weak. It's only really used right now for just plain old A to B sending and for multisig, and there's a bit of other stuff we can potentially do for it, but it's limited.
And why was this not built? Didn't Satoshi know that it would be beneficial to have this scripting language that you're talking about?
Well, the thing is, you have to understand that Satoshi was testing out a completely new idea that nobody had ever even tried before, and there's already these two concepts that are completely revolutionary that he's trying, which is the peer-to-peer blockchain, and also this idea of a currency that's backed by pretty much nothing and doesn't even have an organization supporting it. So those are two ideas that are pretty much already incredibly revolutionary and risky in their own right. So he was just being conservative and didn't want to introduce a third crazy idea at the same time.
Oh, okay. So that took up most of his time, and he didn't want. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm struck by, a lot of people here are Turing complete, and really that means you can do any computation. You don't need a special device or a special programming language once you have Turing complete. So any computation can be done. But really, most of the stuff that I've heard is much simpler than a Turing complete. So most of the ideas you're coming out with could really be solved by just adding an if-then loop or if-then into Bitcoin.
Right. So really, yes, Turing completeness is overrated. It's a buzzword that people like, but really, there are several substantial ways in which Ethereum actually improves on Bitcoin, I would say, rather in terms of its scripting language. So first of all, there's Turing complete programming language, which we talked about. Second is the fact that that contracts can actually have state. So in Bitcoin, a transaction output can be spent or it can be unspent. That's all. You can't have a contract that has multiple stages, and if this happens, you move to this stage, if this happens, you move to that stage. If you want to have some kind of a decentralized company on top of Ethereum, you could do that. But on top of Bitcoin, there's no way to actually store what all of the owners of that company are and actually update that list inside of a script.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is Ethereum allows you to have conditional orders.
Well, not really
conditional
parameters.
parameters.
Bitcoin does conditional. The key word here is state. So contracts have memory. So in Bitcoin, it's just something exists, and then you spend it, and then it doesn't exist.
Okay.
In Ethereum, you could have a contract exist, and then something happens and it activates and it switches to some new state, and then so you could have something like not yet initialized and initialized and finalized.
So it can lay there dormant until it's activated.
Yeah.
So for example, would this be a good example? Let's say that a dad wants to leave an inheritance to a child, and he programs that into Ethereum, and then at a certain time, at a certain age in the future, that when these conditions are met, then the kid can receive the funds or receive the money.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
But you can do that already in Bitcoin.
Right.
That's
one,
a simple.
Yes, that's something you can do, although...
But what would be interesting would be something like you put money somewhere, and then if dad dies and if mom dies, the kid gets released the funds. And clearly taking outside inputs is very hard in Bitcoin.
Or here's another interesting one, which just sort of segues into the next area where Ethereum improves, which is you could have the contract that gives the kid the power to withdraw a maximum of $20,000 per year until he turns 25, and then he can withdraw whatever he wants. So that's actually also an important point, which is that the Bitcoin scripting system isn't really aware of value. So in Bitcoin, an output can either be unspent or it can be spent completely. Whereas in Ethereum, contracts can say, under these conditions, only send out 100 units. Under these, only send out 10 units. So that's very useful for things like, for a lot of financial applications, because you could actually say, something like send 1,000 Ether plus 30 times this particular price ticker. So any kind of financial contract that generally requires you to send some variable amount of money you can do. Also, something like withdrawal limits. So if you want to do something like, you only say we want to have an account where it's like a savings wallet where I'm the owner and you're like a trustee. And so we can set this up so that for less than $100 a day, you only need my signatures. And the contract would actually keep track of it, and it would keep track to make sure that I'm spending less than $100 a day. If I want to withdraw more, then I would need him to co-sign the transaction.
Okay.
Right.
So it's kind of like a multi-sig scenario.
Right, kind of like a multi-sig, but enhanced because it's actually aware of different transaction values, and you can set different policies depending on how much you're actually sending.
Okay.
So I have a question. So you also mentioned applications such as Dropbox, right?
Yes.
You said that you could do, because you can store their storage or their state, you could also store data on the blockchain itself. Could you write entire applications? Could you write Twitter in Ethereum? Could I write eBay on Ethereum?
Possibly. So I'll talk about how our application setup works. So the Ethereum Client is actually a two-level system. So the first level is the technical side that actually interacts with the blockchain and verifies transactions, verifies contracts, verifies blocks, and potentially it mines if you wanted to. And the second level is sort of like a stripped-down Chromium web browser, where basically, which talks to the first level, but all it is just it opens up a white box. And the idea there is that we're going to have an API where anyone can write any kind of apps. And then people can write apps in JavaScript. So it's the exact same tools that you would use to write websites. And you could just port them over here and you just write an app. And then in each of those apps, you could do things like, you could have, like, the simplest app is a wallet. You could have an app to do Dropbox. You could have an app to do Twitter. Now, in the long term, what we'd also want to do is we also want to integrate an API, not just for Ethereum, but also for peer-to-peer protocols in general. So the idea there would be, we would have API calls for being like, look for peers on a certain channel, or sends data to this specific peer, or potentially or what you do when you receive data. So you could potentially do even a completely non-financial and non-Ethereum protocol on top of it. So it would be a really easy platform to write something like BitTorrent, something like a decentralized Twitter. And the idea is, if you want to write an app, your app would be able to take advantage of that. It would be able to take advantage of Ethereum. So it would be able to use like both just more of a regular, not money related, or like non-incentivized peer-to-peer protocol, and the Ethereum blockchain, both for money and for timestamping. And if you want absolutely everyone in the world to copy certain data, you could. So it's this. So you would have this really advanced suite.
Does that enlarge the size of the blockchain? Does it make it bigger? I mean,
so that's the thing, is that we want people to do a lot of things off-chain. So if you want to have a decentralized Twitter, you're not necessarily going to publish a transaction for every message. That would be a pretty expensive way to do it. Like, Twitter doesn't charge you a 5-cent fee, right? So the way that would be set up is probably some kind of system that's on this sort of second level. It's just a peer-to-peer network without more like just a regular BitTorrent style peer-to-peer network. And then if you want to use Ethereum for some specific purpose, so for example, let's say you want to send some big message and you want to use Ethereum to automatically pay people to store the message, or pay people to propagate the message, then that's something you definitely could do.
Okay.
But then your block size is dependent on price, right? So if Ethereum price is low, I have no trouble loading the blockchain with everything.
Right. Well, the idea, so the question of what the transaction fees are going to be, that's something we're very much thinking of. We are, at this point, like, we've we're pretty much almost certainly going to have some kind of mandatory transaction fee, and then that's going to adjust in some fashion. Because ideally, what we want the transaction fee to reflect the cost that you're imposing on the network.
Right, and you've come up with some ideas to work around that. It sounds like a scary aspect to me right now.
Yes, right. It is. Like, transaction fees are a very hard problem, and Bitcoin's solution really isn't a solution at all. Like, I have a blog post on where I was talking about some of these issues. They pretend that it's some market-based system that's supposed to...
It's not at all.
Exactly, it's not at all.
Your writing's great, by the way. I'm a big fan of that.
Ethereum, when you look at Ethereum versus the other altcoins that's on the market, let's take, for example, of like Next. Okay. Now, full disclosure, I help on the marketing with Next, okay? So what makes Ethereum different? Because like from a non-technical perspective from me, okay, a non-technical person, the things that you talk about, they talk about the exact same thing in Next.
Right. Okay, so
right. So what's the difference?
Right. So I would say the difference is that from what I've seen of Next implements a lot of those features explicitly. They have transaction types for all these different things. Yes. Whereas with Ethereum, we have this programming language, and you can just write
all those features
in the programming language, right? So the benefit, it seems like there's no difference between the two paradigms now because we all support all decentralized exchange, financial derivatives, and all the buzzwords. But when you if somebody comes up with something completely new that no one's ever thought of, then it's not. If you have a blockchain design that's just based on having specific transaction types, it's not going to fit in. Whereas here, you just write it in the programming language.
Okay.
So I know software development. I'm a software engineer myself. When is this going to be ready? When are you going to? When is Ethereum?
1.0 is probably in about 6 months or so.
6 months. Okay.
Yeah. The testnet's running right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Testnet's fun. You can actually write contracts.
Okay, but back to that question real quick, just a follow up here. Okay, so you're saying that one's a scripting language, the other one has a bunch of features, right?
Yeah.
What is to prevent the developers of Next to create a scripting language on top of it?
Well,
then wouldn't that be the same as Ethereum then, except they're several months in advance?
It's a little like trying to turn a tank into an airplane just because it has a motor, right? You have to really rebuild it all back up.
Like actually so you can't really build the scripting language on top because the idea is that for it to actually work, the scripting language actually has to have this
foundation.
Hook. Yeah, it has to have this hook and actually have the power to send transactions, so it has to be at the foundation. Now, oddly enough, I was looking through some of the Next specs, and they have Turing Complete scripting language as one of their wish list features. So good luck to you guys on that.
Okay, I just want the cryptocurrency world to succeed.
Yeah,
it does not really matter to me if it's Ethereum or if it's Next. You know, so I'm neutral in that aspect. So I know that there are some coders that might lean towards one side or lean towards another altcoin, but for me personally, as a non-technical person that just wants to see it succeed, I just want, and so I just throw that out there. Right, not as an attack on Next, not as an attack on Ethereum, but more of a curiosity question of what's to prevent this altcoin from developing the same benefits that Ethereum has.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. Like I would say we're even handicapping ourselves just because everything we do is completely open source. Okay, but it's. Yeah, at this point, if you're investing in Ethereum, I would say you're investing in the team and the community to a large extent. Okay.
The other thing too is that what prompted you to do this by itself, like this script language, this Turing Complete script. You know, why didn't you use your talents and your knowledge and your experience and pick out one of the altcoins that's there?
Yeah, well, so I actually was working with Mastercoin before Ethereum, and I was working on implementing savings wallets and contracts for difference. And at that point, I came up with this idea of hey, let's take this idea and let's actually generalize it. and the logical way to generalize things is with a programming language. And I
Okay.
actually submitted the proposal, but at that
It
point,
fell on deaf ears.
well, it's
Not interested?
JR didn't want said that that's, I believe his words were, that's something that we didn't want, that's not going to be in our timeline for at least a few months. And then,
Okay.
yeah, basically I said, okay, you know.
So
I'm
you
just gonna do
decided
it.
to leave that project and go build it from scratch yourself.
Yeah, JR actually has a post on the Mastercoin blog where a few weeks ago where he talks about that. Essentially, like he would prefer Mastercoin to be more of a sort of moderate and less innovative, but more stable sort of thing, sort of
Okay.
in between Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Well, you know, I wish you the best of luck, and thanks for spending the time with James D'Angelo from the World Bitcoin Network and myself, and we wish you the great luck. You know.
No, thank you.
So, all right,
Thanks, Todd, for putting it together.
all right,
All
all right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and what I'll do is I'll get Vitalik's Bitcoin address and leave it at the bottom of this video, and James D'Angelo also. If you guys appreciate their work, I invite you guys to support them, send donations their way.
Leon's
I'm sure,
as well.
And Leon's as well.
Cameraman.
Yeah, and send them some coffee donations or soda donations. I'm pretty sure you drink a lot of sodas while you're programming.
No, actually.
No? Coffee?
Green tea.
Green tea? Okay, there you go. Send some green tea donations to them. All right. So thanks for joining us, and I'll see you guys in the next video.